All right, today I'm going to be talking about my lightning strike, which is on how does isolation affect the student athlete's psychological state. I'm looking into this topic because I'm curious how, due to the current pandemic, that the athlete's psychological state might have changed due to isolation. So, starting off, most of all non-athletes push their bodies to the limits of what they can do, both physically and mentally. This is very common for any athletes that you may know, you may see that they push their bodies not only to the physical limit but also to the mental limit. So, almost all athletes we know have a proper regimented diet and exercise program, which again makes them very excellent on what they do and helps push them to the very limits of what they're able to do. But as you can see, by taking these away, it can have very detrimental effects on the psychological health. So again, how does isolation affect the psychological state? We know isolation is not fun. A lot of us may have faced it ourselves due to the current climate of the world right now. And due to everything going on, I'm curious how does this not only affect the general public, but athletes in particular. So many athletes associate their own identity with the identity of the sport they play. So, for example, a football player identifies themselves as a football player, or a basketball player might identify themselves as a basketball player. So, what if we take that identity away from them when they're no longer playing that sport, and how that might affect how they view themselves? So, as we said earlier, self identity has been crucial in helping understand why isolation may have a bigger psychological impact than once previously believed. And this has helped a lot of studies look into how big the change is and why it is so big than previously believed. So, whenever an athlete cannot play due to injury, they face a degree of isolation, just period. They can either play the sport, they're either on the sideline or they're somewhere not with the team doing the normal activities. So this can increase grief, stress, anxiety, depression, different symptoms like this. So when they're in isolation such as COVID, it can exacerbate these even to a higher level. So the rise in psychological conditions has been linked to the removal of athletes' social support network, such as the teammates, the friends, other people around them that help them stay who they are, stay grounded, and stay consistent with what they do. So by removing these social support networks, it can increase a lot of these depression, anxiety, or different mental health conditions that you may see in people in isolation. So during the current COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know, everyone's been isolating in some capacity. This includes athletes. So trying to look at, again, how this correlates to athletes on a different level compared to just the general public is what I'm trying to hone in on with this research and this topic overall. So while everyone's seeing how this has affected themselves personally, I was trying to look into athletes, particularly. As we know, they have very different lifestyles than a lot of us. While they are very similar to us, the whole way they tackle just life, school, determination, everything is very different. So seeing how they view everything and how this pandemic and isolation has kind of changed that for them can be very eye-opening, and that's why I want to look into this topic. So many studies have found a connection between a rise in mental health conditions and athletes due to COVID. So several studies took actually soccer players in Italy, and they had them fill out a survey of the symptoms before COVID, during, and after, and they saw a huge rise in depression, anxiety, and stress due to this isolation. So studies of different isolation people in Wuhan also occurred in another study, and again they found very similar results. They did general public and they did athletes, and these people again saw a rise in stress, anxiety, depression, and different mental health conditions. So this is very eye opening in seeing how it kind of shifts from them being even if they have mental health conditions beforehand, them being okay, stable, and then once that's taken away from them, it just skyrockets like crazy. So again, these studies just reinforce what I was stating earlier, how there's been connections and links between mental health research on conditions and isolation and how they two combined to exacerbate the former. So overall, the main takeaway from this presentation is to not only look at athletes' physical injuries, but also look at their mental injuries and conditions. So while they may not be as present or may not be as obvious as these physical injuries, they are still just as important, if not more important, for these athletes, especially in these difficult times when there's a lot going on, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, especially with seasons getting canceled and different things changing all the time. It's very important to make sure you take into account your athlete's mental health. So as ATCs, we're some of the few people that the athletes can feel comfortable opening up to us. We see them every day for practice. We see them in every game, in the clinic. So they should be able to feel comfortable coming to us about these mental health conditions. And we should be able to identify the athletes' mental health conditions, what the symptoms are like before they go into isolation, in case they ever do have to go into isolation. And just so that if they do go into isolation, we can identify the best treatments and the best way to help them efficiently and effectively. So when they do go into isolation, they're taken care of as best as possible under our care. These are my references.